Hey Panda Nation, you are listening to the Inverted Gear podcast with your hosts Nelson and Hillary. Join us every week as we take you behind the scenes into our brand, discuss upcoming projects, and conversate beyond the mat with the interesting people we've met along the way.
Okay, Inverted Gear podcast episode number 5. My name is Nelson Puentes. I'm joined by my co-host
Hillary Witt.
And today's guest is Matt Kirtley, better known as Aesopian.
Yeah, unfortunately. Hi, hey, good to see you guys.
Matt, you have my favorite Jujitsu origin story of all time.
Is it? Okay. Yeah, so I'll go into it, but I have a thing I can send you later. I got into Jujitsu because of D&D. I was researching for a character class, and you have like all the extra manuals you can look through.
Dungeons and Dragons for the uninitiated.
Come on. But and there was some manual that had this. I think it's called the Reaping Mauler. He's this little dwarf covered in like leather armor with spikes, and he's a grappler. And at the time, I was like, I wonder what that even looked like. What does a grappler fight like? And because all I'd seen it was like kung fu movies and martial arts movies, but never like, I don't know, I didn't think he would fight like a pro wrestler. And then at the time, my dad was like, "Oh, you want to know what a spiked covered dwarf would fight like?" And then he had me watch The Smashing Machine. That Mark, who was his name? Not Mark Kerr, was it?
I think Mark Kerr,
Mark Kerr.
Yeah, Mark Kerr. He had me watch the Mark Kerr Smashing Machine. And then I started watching mixed martial arts and like buying up DVDs because there wasn't really anything online at the time, and the pay-per-views were like the only way to watch UFC if they were even. I don't know. They probably were doing pay-per-views then, and so I started trying to like figure out what would grappling look like, and then I found like the Gracies and Sakuraba and those guys, and then I was really into watching all the MMA that I could find, and finally my dad was like, "You watch a lot of this, why don't you like do something?" Because at the time I was just like sitting around working like an IT job, and I was just happened to have like a Gracie Baja gym like 5 minutes from my house that I'd never noticed before, and I went and signed up. But yeah, it was research for my D&D character. I never got to play a grappler because as people who play D&D will know, the grappling rules are terrible and it's not fun. So just be a wizard or use swords or something. But
Wise words.
Yeah.
So Matt, one of the most fascinating things about you, and I think one of the reasons we're good friends, is you have a really hard time just being like a surface level fan of anything you're into. So like, is anything like you find interesting, you go down these like deep dives, and it's some like the best conversations I ever had having with you about like random topics that you spend some long amount of hours like researching. Like I remember you had you had a hip injury like that was bothering you, and then like I mentioned, it's like, hey, like, you know, you might want to look into this FRC thing, like this mobility thing. And then like next thing I knew, you were like getting certified.
Yeah, that's kind of how it goes. Yeah, it was kind of funny going to that too because it's functional range conditioning, and so it's mostly for people who are like chiropractors or athletic trainers or somebody who actually has like a way of making money off of this. And it's really hard to learn about this system without going to either somebody who's already certified or by going to the seminars. And there wasn't anyone around me who had the certifications, so I just went to the seminar, and yeah, so it was like all these people with actual training, actual medical knowledge and anatomy, and I'm there. I'm like, I do jiu-jitsu, but it turns out we have a few other friends who've done that, like Josh Vogel. Yeah. So yeah, if I like something, I can get too focused on it, and then that's all I think about. It's like that joke, or you know how like when a kid is at that age where they just learn like every raccoon fact, like all they want to do is tell you about the one thing. I just go through that over and over again my whole life.
Which, I mean, you got before we leap away from the functional range conditioning, because I think there's a lot of value in that for your average grappler. I know like the drills like you have me do solve a lot of the issues I was having with my knees.
Oh, me too with my shoulder. I still do a lot of like
Oh,
those
good.
rotational exercises you show me, and then we moved on to like my bicep. And yeah, like you said with your knees, hips, I still do the hip stretches. Like really appreciate you, Matt.
Oh, good to
Really,
hear.
yeah, and just how you retain that information that you can teach it to others as well. It's a gift.
Yeah, I remember you showing the 90-90 stretch and then like a few like the pell rails for the hips.
Hmm.
And like maybe like that hurts my knees and you're like, yeah, you should feel in your hip. That means you need to work on it, Nelson.
Yeah.
So like my
The
hips were so tight that like anytime like my hip needed to rotate, it would not rotate. Like all this strain would go, downstream into my knee, and like then like all the knee injuries I had for the last few years. Like
Yeah, that's one of the best lessons you get from FRC, which is just taking the basic stuff. So you're talking about doing like the arm movements or the hip movements is it's a really simple idea, but it's like you got to really drill it into people, which is if you can't really move a joint like it's supposed to move, you're going to accomplish that movement some other way. So you're going to start using other parts of your body. So a lot of times people will be like, I got good shoulders. And then you have them just do like what we call the shoulder cars. There's a lot of acronyms in FRC, so you have to get used to that. But which is just the sequence of moving your shoulder joint, just this joint, through the biggest range it could do. And you'll see people go, oh, my shoulders are good. And you watch them do it and their whole body's moving. And then when you make them freeze the rest of their body and say, no, no, just show me your shoulder. You're moving your spine, your hips, everything's moving. And you find out their shoulder barely moves, and they've all the work gets moved somewhere else in their body. So like what you said with the knees, is your knees are having to do the jobs of hips. They're having to figure out how to accomplish all the rotation and movements you were demanding of your body. But when the body runs into a limitation in a joint, it doesn't usually just go, oh, I can't do it. If you make yourself do it, it's going to push the work somewhere else. So your knees will get it, your lower back will get it. Like for me, I had lower back pain as my main issue. And it took years and years to figure out it was my hips because my hips wouldn't work. And then something's got to work. And so the force would get jammed up into my back instead of my hips. So just having a basic routine where you can go through your joints and just do a checklist of how do they even work and do they even work? And in FRC terms, it's like, do they even exist? Like if we define a shoulder or a joint as a certain range of movements and you can't do those movements, then you kind of don't have the joint. You only have like a part of the joint, and then everything else is going to have to take over for being that joint.
Yeah, I mean, jiu-jitsu people are like notorious for saying things like, "Oh, that's my bad shoulder. Oh,
Yeah,
that's my
they're just
bad
living
elbow.
with it.
It's my bad knee." And like especially like older grapplers, when they get injured, it's not an injury; it's just like a small permanent disability. You
Yeah.
know, but that you can't I'm not saying you're gonna regrow an ACL magically, but to a certain extent there's a lot of injuries that we carry, myself included, that if you put the work in, you can regain the range of motion of your shoulder, your hip, your knee, ankles, like all that kind of stuff, and you will be a better grappler for it.
Yeah, people will write off those injuries for just no good reason, meaning they probably just didn't know what to do to solve it, or the things they were given were pretty passive or bland, like, oh, just go to massage or go to physical therapy where they're going to have you do this with a band for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really work for them. And so they just resign themselves to having those injuries. But if you take the time and you really know what you're doing, there's a lot of change you can make.
Yeah, it's amazing. As soon as you had me doing we started doing those drills, and you had me do it, I was stubborn about it, but you got me doing them, and after a few months I really noticed a difference. And then now I really make a point to go through those, even now that I'm not training. Like I'm really putting the time into some of those positions, so make sure like my joints are going to be where they need to be when we get back to training.
Yeah, no, me too. Because I have both just like my aggravated shoulder. Never know what exactly I did to it, but it was something that has always been there with me since I was probably a blue belt. But then I also have injuries where I know exactly what happened, like a torn hamstring. And I have to say, these exercises, whether you know where it came from or how long you've had it, how soon you start after the injury, it's still do it, even though we haven't been training ourselves. It's been very, very helpful.
So I
That's
think
good to hear.
We'll link to that article you wrote for Inverted Gear about how to start a mobility practice. Yeah. I think that's a really good resource you put together there.
Yeah, I still remember though when we were doing it during training, just having that as like a little warm-up routine or cool-down routine even. Just those extra 5-10 minutes you give yourself make a big difference.
That's great. See, have this been your experience too, where you have those guys who say, "Oh, this is my bad shoulder," and you say, "Well, what do you do to make it feel better?" And they go, "Oh, nothing." It's
I
you
went
just
to
like
see an
you just like the
orthopedic
right
surgeon.
to complain about it. I saw an orthopedic surgeon. Yeah, they scoped it. You're gonna have you, or people go, "Oh, I'm not flexible," and you go, "How often do you stretch?" And they go, "Oh, never." What a mystery! What a mystery!
Yeah, I remember we had a training partner that was having shoulder impingement, and we're like, "Oh, does it feel better when you hang from a bar?" And then he's like, "Oh no," and then he like tried it. He's like, "Oh, it feels so much better." He's like, "Okay, like do that."
Then do that
all the time,
and then give yourself the time.
Give yourself the time, and then like make that part of your whatever routine is. Like especially at the gym we were training at, there was a pull-up bar you had to walk next to get to the mat.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But
you know that idea like Pavel has, the grease the groove idea.
Mm-hmm.
Like the idea being that if there's some movement you want to get better, like a pull up or a push up or whatever it is, just do it like all throughout the day, just kind of whenever. And so I remember from that the idea, like if you have a pull up bar in your house, always do a pull up when you go past it. And so just like you need these little routines, because I think a lot of the issues with jiu-jitsu is people want like an immediate fix so they can get right back to training. And if you tell them, well, you're trying to heal, like you're trying to change connective tissue, which is really slow. You're trying to, get your nervous system to get out of protecting an area, and it takes time. And if they can't have a stretch, like someone comes to me, they go, "Oh, I hurt my neck yesterday in training. What's a stretch to fix that?" I'm like, I don't like rest it. Like, I don't know. I don't have MRI vision. Like all kinds of things could be wrong with your neck. So you need to like be taking care of yourself over a long term. So like it's like flossing. Like no one wants to floss. It's so boring and it's a pain. But you like know you should do it, and there's no downside to doing it other than like the 2 minutes of your day. But no one wants to do it. So like a lot of this joint care stuff is like flossing.
Yeah. And the other issue with the joint care is a lot of times, since it's a gradual buildup, you really don't notice how much range of motion you're losing over the years or after injuries, because you slowly come back. But then suddenly you realize it's like, oh, I'm trying to kneel and I can't kneel all the way down anymore. Or like if I'm in a deep squat, I'm like my squat is not as deep as it used to be. And those kind of things just add up over time. Especially, and then like, if we're doing a sport where sometimes we get forced into positions. So guess what? It's like you can't, like, if you don't have the passive range of motion to just go there, what's going to happen when somebody forces you there?
Yeah.
And then that's what a lot of these injuries take place. So I really think like everybody should take some time and like really take like a self-assessment of some of these joints and put the work in.
What you're feeling and what's maybe holding you back.
Yeah, it can really surprise people too when you take them through these, like the cars or any of these basic assessments. You put them in front of a mirror and they have so little understanding of how their body really moves, because your body just creates movement how it creates it. So it's going to use whatever muscles, joints to achieve the goal. It's not thinking, or it's not working really in terms of individual joints. So when you make someone do that and you say, like for me, it was, oh, it seems like I have a flexible guard because I'm tall, but I can't do the splits or anything. Like it's mostly just I have a really bendy back, but that's why I had back problems. Was my hips would get jammed, and then my back would have to do all the movement to make up for it. So just to have like put yourself in front of a mirror and be strict about, if I move my shoulder, is it really just the shoulder moving, or is it every other part of me? And just that alone is a big wake up for a lot of people to realize they don't really know how to use their body or what it's doing when it does stuff.
Yeah. Let's switch gears a little bit. I think you are known in the internet community because you were probably one of the earliest members to start posting videos online before, like, YouTube techniques were commonplace, or Instagram or whatever, what have you. You were posting videos. What year did you start posting videos online? Like those half guard videos you posted when you were a blue belt at the time?
I was probably a blue belt then, maybe a purple belt. The thing I started with wasn't even videos because there wasn't any good video hosting at the time. Like, to host a video was like, you made a bandwidth. Like, how are you hosting this? Because there wasn't YouTube. There was like Google videos was one of the original places you could upload an actual long video, and that got rolled into YouTube later. But I used to just take photos. Like, that was the thing. You would just have to take photos with like a standalone camera, not a cell phone camera. Those didn't exist. Or if they did, they were garbage. And then upload those and type up what you were doing in each one.
That's what I remember. Your writing and the pictures to go with it.
So what I had going for me was just that I had a digital camera and enough time to take the photos and write up what I was doing. And it's hard to remember this because now it's so different. But at the time, that was a big deal because otherwise your things were like these dark, grainy photos taken like Henzo's basement that looked like, I don't know, like something you'd see in like a snuff film. They just like the lighting and the like 3 photos and like 2 captions, and it would just be like the only thing you could find online was this weird stuff. So to have a well-lit, long sequence of photos, like, remember like Victory Belt books being such a revolution because they took more than like 5 photos of a move. They would dedicate like 3 pages to a move instead of like 1. So that coming from that, having a blue belt put stuff up was really a big deal, a big deal in a little world at the time. But I put up a series on half guard. That was probably like 2006, 2007 maybe. And it's just me showing my purple belt half guard, but I still have people come to me and say, "Oh man, that was the thing that got me through." My purple belt was I just watched your half guard videos, and like I'm sure looking back they're just whatever, but we were so starved for instructional content back then.
Yeah, I remember working on my half guard. Like, whatever instructor I was training with at the time was like, "Why would you play half guard when you can play full guard?" I refused to show me any half guard, so I was like, "Okay, Google." Show me the way, Google. And then I found the Aesopian.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, ooh, look at this knee shield. What is this technology?
Yeah, my proudest moment on that was it John Wills, who's the Australian or the New Zealand?
John B. Will?
Yeah.
Right.
John Will emailed me to be like, "Oh, I was watching your videos. I love them. I was showing him the Higan Machado. Great stuff. Keep it up." Because, I mean, I got a lot of crap for being like a blue belt and purple belt and putting stuff online. Because at the time, people were like, "Who are you? Only black belts, 4th degree should put anything up. You don't know what you're doing. It takes time to really absorb the depths of jiu-jitsu. What are you doing just putting techniques out there? You don't know what you're talking about." So I got a lot of that for a lot of years. So to have someone who I watched as a blue belt, as a white belt, email me out of nowhere, just be like, "Hey, I liked your videos. I've been working on them. They're really great," was a nice little ego boost for me.
Because you actually listened, because you actually taught the move. You weren't holding back information. You were easy to understand. And like you said, like well lit goes a long way.
Yeah, I wish I could say that about my webcam right now, but
it's okay. We can see you, Matt. We can
see you. Good.
Matt, so when at that time you were doing that, and I remember there was a few more like early websites. Was it Lockflow?
Lockflow, yep. That was
wow.
That was one of the big ones. I think anyone could submit techniques.
I remember Riley had some stuff up there. And then Christian had the blog for his gym, and then like Christian was posting stuff.
Christian
Also,
created an MMA library where you could upload
yeah,
stuff, and that's where I put a few things. And then like there was some guy, I have no idea who he was really, but he had just like some collection of grappling moves he had put up, like almost like catch wrestling stuff. And again, we were so starved for content at the time that I emailed the guy. I was like, "Hey, can I put this up on this other site?" And he was excited. So there's like some, there's some collection of these garbage, uh, uh, so like American submission wrestling, but whatever that would have been back in like 2004. That I like moved over to what Christian's site, and Christian, I remember being like, "This stuff is not the best." It's like, yeah, but at least you got content.
yeah. I mean, Christian has been making like grappling websites and like his little communities for such a long time. Because like MMA Library, like at the time, was kind of a big deal on its own, and then eventually he created Globetrotters,
Hmm.
and now he has what's his social media site?
The belt checker.
The Belt Checker. So it is a fascinating thing, and I remember you telling me a story where when Christian took the trip, Christian Groger from Globetrotters took this trip around the world, and he was in Florida, but he didn't have the best understanding of U.S. geography, so he's trying to visit Matt. Where were you at the time?
I lived in Clearwater, which is near Tampa, and then he was either he was somewhere north or south of there, but by like 5 hours. So he's like, "I'm in Florida. Can you come see me?" And I was like, it was like short notice, and I was like, "I don't have like 10 hours of driving I can do right now to see you." Because yeah, for Europeans, like remember we went to that USA camp in it was either the first or the second one, and someone asked us like, "Oh, did you have to travel far to get here?" And we had all carpooled, and so it was like 8 hour drive to Maine. And we're like, "Oh, it wasn't that bad, like 8 hour drive, did it in a day." And the guy was like, he's like, "I flew here from Iceland, and it was less than 8 hours to get here, like between the flight and driving from Boston, like so
Yeah.
like." He's like, if I drove for 8 hours in my country, I would like circumnavigate the place like 3 times.
Yeah, we had a full card too. I think we had Ollie and Eric as well. Ollie Geddes and Eric Bydark, like another two
Yeah,
Globetrotter
yeah, that was
instructors.
right. Yep. I remember Ollie trying to just like maximize his protein intake, just like every stop going and buying protein bars.
Protein bars with chocolate milk.
He was all excited. He's like, "Yeah, this new study came out that said you just can't get enough protein. They used to think you could, but now you can't." Like, remember that?
Yes,
Yeah,
it
Oh
you
was.
could
yeah,
really.
We need to get
because he was
Ollie
our
on the
house
podcast.
guest for a little bit before the trip.
Hmm.
Yeah, he
He
stayed.
was looking at all the protein,
Yeah, he was here for a few days. It's funny
trying
because
to
he
figure out
bought
where.
this like square tub of protein, and we still have it in the house. I used like refill it, so it's still in my cupboard. I'm like, train for Ollie. Every time I lift weights, I'm like, do it for Ollie. So
Yeah, remember he found that weird little tiny gym in Maine because he's like, there's like, he
Yes,
went to the
he
camp.
knew
No,
he.
there was no weight training. There was no barbells or anything, and he found like some tiny little hut like in the town in Maine, population like 10, and they had stuff, so he kept going there to train.
Yeah, I remember
yeah,
him and MJ would go.
yeah, they were in. This was a camp in Lake Winnipesaukee, right?
Hmm.
And then it was funny the other day we were watching. What was that show? The Expanse. And then like it's like set in the future, and then like Lake Winnipesaukee is like a major plot point in the story. I was like, oh man, that is the randomest thing ever. It's like I've been there.
Yeah, he was like, "Hillary, do you know where that is? You know where that is?" I was like,
I got so excited. It was great.
"Yeah, nerding
Yeah.
out.
Nerding out, yeah. Matt,
Beautiful place."
one of the besides being known for the internet, you are known for your crucifix. How do you feel now that because when we started talking about this and you were showing me a lot of this stuff, the crucifix wasn't really a big part of most people's jiu-jitsu game, but it seems like over the last few years, especially with all the Kimura trap stuff going on and more emphasis in submission only, and people really developing like the modern back control game, a lot of the techniques you've been showing me for a long time are becoming like really mainstream.
I think it's what you said, especially about the no points matches, because it's not worth any points. So you didn't have a big reason to do it if you were training for IBJJF, because like, of course, yeah, if you can get the submission, sure. But if you don't, you do all this back control work and you fight for a while. And if the guy gets out, you get no points for it. So unless you're really confident in your submission, why would you invest a lot of time? But once you don't care about the points and you just care about the control or the submission, and you can move between them and not have to worry about giving up a position, then the crucifix gets to be a lot more valuable. And so I always just liked it because it was a fun, weird thing, and it gives you an angle of attack that a lot of people aren't used to. But you're seeing that blend where if you have the good back control, whatever that is these days with harness and Kimura grips and seatbelt, then it fits right in because it's just there's what's your upper body doing, and it's usually pretty similar between crucifix and other back controls if you get that kind of off angle back control. And so, and then it's already pretty popular to trap the arms with your legs, even if you just have rear mount. So having a thing that blends between those is real nice. And like you said, the Kimura trap, if you want to use that term, being able to move from that grip into crucifix into back control. It's one of those things where plenty of people do okay without it, but once they learn it, they realize there was a kind of an area that they were always skipping over, that now that they know it's there, they find it useful. Like I remember a similar thing happening back when X-Guard was new, where
it's like a new toy.
Right. So when X-Guard was new, people would be like, oh, well, we would do that. There was like the one X-Guard sweep that everyone kind of knew because it was just like a transitional thing between trying to sweep someone from butterfly guard and then you throw your feet in and then keep sweeping them. But then to actually spend time there and see what else you could do, and like so Marcelo hanging out in X-Guard and then going out the back door and out the front and all these and developing out more branches took something that everyone knew was there, like the X-Guard position, but no one had done it in that depth. So I've talked to people where when they learned the crucifix, they were like, yeah, I knew the crucifix, like the one, someone grabs your leg the wrong way and then you roll and you do the classic hand behind the head choke. And they, so the crucifix isn't new, but to take time and break that down into more littler positions of crucifix on the knees, crucifix on the back, what are the gripping sequences I could have, and just to spend the time to really flesh it out into somewhere you could hang out in rather than it just being a quick transition between two things you already do and maybe one extra move that joins them. Has that been what you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great position. Also, what you're seeing a lot too is the rear triangle.
Mm-hmm.
So that triangle kind of feeds off somebody defending the arm from getting the crucifix. Then you kind of push, you throw your foot over, you push that elbow down, that wrist down, and then adjust and catch that triangle. So you see that a lot now too, which was really not a popular submission a few years back, but now you see it a lot.
Yeah, for a lot of years that was considered, it wasn't unheard because people knew it, but it was often hard to finish. People weren't sure of the mechanics. Where like if it didn't work, you were kind of just like, I don't know what was wrong. I couldn't feel like, because it's often such a funny angle and you can't see what you're doing or you can't adjust it like a normal triangle, that people would lock it up and then it'd either work or it wouldn't, but you wouldn't be sure why. And if it didn't work, we'd often have someone really stuck there, but you would just be stuck there for a long time trying to pull on different parts of their body to figure out how to make them tap.
Make them tap with a hamstring stretch. That was
So you start grabbing at their leg.
That's what I would do, is yank on those ankles and try to make them
like stop moving so I can figure this out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting to talk about the X guard because now you see the wrong X guard where the feet are crisscross, like they're the opposite of the regular position, and that leads into a lot of the leg lock entries that are becoming popular. So same thing, like, everybody knew that position existed, but it was not the best for sweeping, and leg locks were not really a thing at the time. So everybody skipped over that position. But now everybody is starting to, prefer that position over the regular X guard so they can attack all these leg lock entries.
Yeah, it's funny to see because when I learned it, and I think you would have had this too, people go, oh yeah, here's the other way you can lock your legs. It's good for like one sweep, so don't really do it because otherwise there's not a lot of control. And if you just sit there with your feet the wrong way, there isn't a lot of control, but it's what it opens up for if you are willing to go down other avenues.
Yeah, it's been fascinated for as long as we've been around. You started training what, 2005? You said
I think 2004 is probably more accurate.
2004. So we kind of got to witness and see a lot of the evolution of modern jiu-jitsu, and like, you know, the half guard revolution and X guard and then like deep half guard and like all these positions that were just not around when we started training, and then having and seeing the when 50-50 came into play, and then from 50-50 like all the inverted back takes, like the berimbolo, and now now all the berimbolo variations, like the baby bolo and the hooks and all the crab right shenanigans that are taking place. Not to even mention like lapel guard. So it's been such an interesting time in jiu-jitsu to like witness all the changes that have taken place. And how do you think the internet affected the way all these things took place, and how fast it spread versus how...
Yeah, it just blew up. It's like exponentially grown. Where I think when I started, and like when YouTube became a thing, like calling something YouTube Jiu-Jitsu was an insult because it was usually a gimmick that somebody would put up for like, that was like, oh, what we could put on the internet? I don't know. Look at this. And that would be some garbage move that isn't really that good. Now, like, there's the amount of information you can get that's really good is so high just on YouTube. And if you want DVDs and streaming services and pay-per-view videos, and if something like, think of back like before we even trained back in the 90s, like you really could develop a secret move. Like you could develop a secret move and even do it a few times in tournaments and have it still be a secret. If no one was able to video it, no one was able to really see it, they'd all have to go home back to their gyms and try to figure out what happened. But now people are going to see it live, or they're going to see it right after, and then the guy's probably going to sell a DVD or put up a video about it like a week later. And so to have just so much ability to cross-pollinate techniques, to study things right as they happen, to talk to the people, like to be able to message the person who did it and have them just answer you, and they could be anywhere in the world. Like that is just such a revolutionary thing for any field, where before you had to go through a few gatekeepers, you had a few instructors who you could go to. Yeah, I remember one thing my instructor said was, he was like acknowledging that the internet is good after years of thinking it was bad. Like eventually it got better. But he said one of the things he missed was the specialness of the feeling of going to class and knowing that that day you're going to get something really valuable and hard to get anywhere else. And that people would really focus in class and really come to class to learn because you couldn't get in anywhere else. And I can see there's a certain charm in that, but if you're a real self-motivated learner, there's so much material now you can grab for yourself. And like, and I feel especially once you get past like blue belt, your learning isn't really about new techniques so much. Like white to blue is a lot of just like, I don't know anything, so if I add things I know, techniques, I'll get better. But then you max out where there are too many techniques and you're not going to improve by learning more because you're not good enough at the ones you do. And so once you have to transition into, well, how do I get better at what I already do, or how do I combine them better? The instruction often has to become much more self-motivated because most classes are geared towards just showing you a new technique, or like the beginner approach. And so if you can go out and pick a thing you want to study and come back to the gym and work on it, you can make a lot of progress. If that's a thing that your mind is good at, is like absorbing information and bringing it back. And so there's like a huge amount of material out there you can use for that. So it's been wild to see how much it's changed, and how, you know, now people can just have their phone on the mat and say, look, let's drill this, where before you just had to hope somebody had trained with some guy or watched some VHS tape. So it's really, if you can handle the amount of information, there is nothing really holding people back from learning the techniques anymore. You just got to put in all the time to actually do them.
Yeah, I mean, now the hard part now, especially if you're starting out, is where do you go? And then that question always going to depend is like, hey, like, do you enjoy gi? Do you enjoy no gi? How far down either path do you want to go? Do you want to stay in the middle and do have separate games? Or do you want to have one game that's going to work on both situations? And the other part of the question is like, how old are you? It's like, if you're 20 years old and you plan on training the rest of your life, doesn't really matter. You really are going to have time to eventually go down all these rabbit holes. But if you're like a guy in his 40s and only gets to train twice a week, where your reps go really does matter a lot more, because the amount of training time you have is finite.
That's a good point. Yeah, and I know people, especially like you said, when a young guy starts and they want to be like, how do I maximize my learning? How do I really focus? And you're like, you're young, just do it all. Like, you'll get better in the long run if you don't specialize yet. You can get, like, if your goal is to compete as soon as possible, then yeah, learn like some specialty things, but don't get overly specialized. Like we were talking before off podcast about like approach towards having kids train, and how they find like if you take a kid and you make them specialize in a sport too young, they often don't become the best at it, because you might have forced them into a sport that they're not going to be good at, or you might just kill their passion for it because they didn't get to pick it. They got made to do it. So your adult's a little different, but like I'd say when you're new and you're starting jiu-jitsu, be willing to try everything. Do no gi even if it feels weird. Do gi even if you think it's boring. Do some self-defense stuff even if that's not your big goal. Do competition stuff if you're really only training for self-defense, because you want to round out your experiences, and then you can figure out where you want to spend your time. But I think when you're new, don't rush to make that decision, because you can cut yourself off from a lot of learning, where even if you do want to specialize later, there will be lessons you bring from the other things you did.
Awesome.
Wow. Yeah, that's really good advice, Matt. Thank you.
Sure.
Sometimes, even though like it, you still need to hear it.
Yeah. Like I'm lazy now. I just like doing gi. That's been my favorite for the longest. I did about 50-50 gi no gi since I started jiu-jitsu. And I used to teach most of the no gi classes, but what it is, honestly, like I was even really into leg locks and everything, but it just makes my legs hurt. Like even if I'm not getting submitted by heel hooks, just doing heel hooks is so much wear and tear on my knees that I'll just be an old man and just do like gi jiu-jitsu and not be so sore. But I'm glad I did all the no gi, and I'm sure I'll get back into it. But you just start broad and then you can focus in.
Awesome, Matt. Thank you. Thank you for your time today. Where can people find you online?
They can go to aesopian.com, Aesopian. And I'm on Reddit. I keep giving this weird plug. I'm on the BJJ Mental Models Discord. So if you want to give those guys money, you can join their Patreon and talk to me more regularly. Otherwise, just message me. If you look up Aesopian on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, you'll also find me.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Matt.
See you later.
Thank you for listening, Panda Nation. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Inverted Gear podcast. You can find us at invertedgear.com as well as your favorite podcast app. Don't forget to give us a like, and we'll see you soon.